Shalom and good morning, brethren. We today are on Isaiah chapters 22 to 26. Some short chapters. God is still going through his prophecies of punishment to the nations. Starting from Isaiah chapter 22, verse 4. Therefore said I, look away from me, I will weep bitterly. Labour not to comfort me, because of the spoiling of the daughter of my people. For it is a day of trouble and the treading down and of perplexity by Yahweh God of hosts in the valley of vision, breaking down the walls and of crying to the mountains. Verse 10. And you have numbered the houses of Jerusalem, and the houses have you broken down to fortify the walls. You made also a ditch between the two walls for the water of the old pool, but you have not looked unto the maker thereof, neither have respect unto him that fashioned it long ago. And in that day did Yahweh God of hosts call to weeping, and to mourning, and to baldness, and to girding with sackcloth. And behold, joy and gladness, slaying oxen, and killing sheep, eating flesh, and drinking wine. Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we shall die. And it was revealed in mine ears by Yahweh, God of hosts, surely this iniquity shall not be purged from you till you die, saith Yahweh, the God of hosts.
So, if you are new to our studies, or you're a newcomer, we are going through Genesis to Revelations. Today is the chapters of Isaiah chapters 22 to 26 to identify what the chapters say about what is needed for salvation. Also today, see if you can spot when prophecies about Yeshua, which most people wrongly call Jesus, are mentioned. Now, in those verses I've just read, as we read through the prophets, note their message of calling Israel, specifically Judah in this section, back to obeying God's commandments. The severe punishment inflicted on them for not keeping the commandments or the covenants, which is covered in verses 17 to 18. Then asks, if God did not spare them, his peculiar chosen people, descendants of Abraham, why would he spare future transgressors of the same laws? And I think your answer would be, he would not. One law for everybody, as he says elsewhere. One way for everybody. So, continuing from Isaiah chapter 22, verse 21.
As we read through the prophets, note their message of calling Israel, Judah, back to obeying God's commandments. The severe punishment inflicted on them for not keeping the commandments or the covenant. Verses such as 17 to 18. Then asks, if God did not spare them, why would he spare future transgressors? Continue from 22 verse 21. And I will clothe him with thy robe, and strengthen him with thy girdle, and I will commit thy government into his hand, and he shall be a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and to the house of Judah. And the key of the house of David will I lay upon his shoulder. So he shall open, and none shall shut, and he shall shut, and none shall open. See Revelations chapters 3 verse 7 in reference to the shutting and the opening. Chapter 23, starting from verse 15. And it shall come to pass in that day that Tyre shall be forgotten 70 years, according to the days of one king. After the end of 70 years shall Tyre sing as an harlot. Take an harp, go about the city, thou harlot, that has been forgotten. Make sweet melody, sing many songs, that thou mayest be remembered. And it shall come to pass after the end of 70 years, that Yahweh will visit Tyre, and she shall turn to her hire. She shall turn to her hire, and shall commit fornication with all the kingdoms of the world upon the face of the earth. And her merchandise and her hire shall be holiness to Yahweh. It shall not be treasured nor laid up, For her merchandise shall be for them that dwell before Yahweh to eat sufficiently and for durable clothing.
So, of course, fornication, nation between nation, is not an individual man with a woman in or outside of marriage. It's to do with their idolatrous false god worship.
So here we see the word fornication, talking about a nation, Tyre. And it shall turn to her hire, and shall commit fornication with all the nations of the whole world on the face of the earth. So one nation cannot have sex with another nation. So it is to do with false god worship. The comparison to a man and woman sexuality is just a comparison in the translations of the Bible. But fornication actually means false god worship. Totally different from sex and idolatry in the terms of man and woman. Chapter 24, verse 1. Behold, Yahweh maketh the earth empty, maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. And it shall be, as with the people, so with the priest, as with the servant, so with his master, as with the maid, so with her mistress, as with the buyer, so with the seller, as with the lender, so with the borrower, as with the taker of usury, so with the giver of usury to him. The land shall be utterly emptied and utterly spoiled, for Yahweh hath spoken this word. Verse 5. The earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinances, broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore hath the curse devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left. So we see the curses are happening in biblical times, not in recent slavery times of 400 years ago. Chapter 25, verse 1. O Yahweh, thou art my God, I will exalt thee, I will praise thy name, for thou hast done wonderful things. Thy counsels of the old are faithfulness and true. Verse 4. For thou hast been a strength to the poor, a strength to the needy in his distress, a refuge from the storm, a shadow from the heat, when the blast of the terrible one is as a storm against the war. Verse 9. And it shall be said in that day, Lo, this is our God, we have waited for him, and he will save us. This is Yahweh, we have waited for him, we will be glad and rejoice in his salvation. My comment. Yahweh God is a keeper of his word, and he cannot lie. He said if his people, including us, return to keeping his laws, the consequence of not keeping will cease, and he will return to us. Remember Deuteronomy chapter 30 verse 2? And shall return unto Yahweh thy God, and shall obey his voice according to all that I command thee this day, thou and thy children, with all thine heart and with all thy soul. That then Yahweh thy God will turn thy captivity and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from all the nations where Yahweh thy God scattered thee. Chapter 26, verse 1. In that day shall this song be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city, salvation will God appoint for walls and bulwark. Open you the gates, that a righteous nation which keepeth the truth may enter in. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee. Trust you in Yahweh forever, for in Yahweh Jehovah is everlasting strength. Now remember what it was truth in Psalms 119 verse 142? Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and the law is truth. We also read verse 2, open thy gates, that the righteous nation which keepeth the truth may enter. And I'll draw you to Revelation 22:14, which says that those who keep the commandments of God have a right to entry. Okay, continuing from 26 verse 9. With my soul have I desired thee in the night, yea, with my spirit within me will I seek thee early. For when thy judgments are in the earth, the inhabitants of the world will learn righteousness. Verse 20. Come, my people, enter thou into thy chambers, and shut thy doors about thee. Hide thyself, as it were, for a little moment, until the indignation be overpast. For behold, Yahweh cometh out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. The earth also shall disclose her blood, and shall no more cover her slain. Last comment. Remember, Israel was also punished. No nation that committed iniquity escaped. God's correction also applies to humans, Jews and Gentiles. 1 Peter chapters 4 verse 17. For the time is come, the judgment must begin at the house of God. And if it be first begin at us, what shall the end be of them that obey not the gospel of God? 1 Peter 4:18. And if the righteous scarcely be saved, where shall the ungodly and the sinner appear? Now remember 1 Timothy chapters 1 verse 7, I think, that the law was made for the unholy and the profane and so forth. So the ones who do not keep the law, they are the ungodly and the sinners. Romans chapters 2 verses 9 and 10. Tribulation and anguish upon every soul of man that doeth evil, to the Jew first, and also to the Gentile. But glory, honour, and peace to every man that worketh good, to the Jew first, and also to the Gentile. So remember, God is not a respecter of persons, nor of colour, nor gender. Shalom until tomorrow, God willing.